Hi, I'm Sonia Feertchak. Thanks for watching my talk today. I'm a French author, specialist in women's and feminist issues, but as you will hear, I'm not a specialist in languages. It was important to me, though, to make this talk in Agatha Christie's language, but please let me apologize in advance for the damage I'll do to your ears. For this 2021 edition of the Agatha Christie Festival, I would like to mention my rereading of the Queen of Crime's work, which I developed in my book La Vérité. The truth kills, deadly truth. It's not easy to translate into English. It's a play on words. The truth that is concealed from the verb taire, meaning to conceal, and the truth that kills from the verb tuer, meaning to kill. However, the subtitle is clearer: Agatha Christie and the Family. I show that for the past 100 years, the Queen of Crime has advocated for the rejection of domination and the liberation of speech. Christie is far more modern than her novels suggest. In her autobiography, Agatha Christie mentions a rather curious game that her big sister Madge invented for her, the elder sister game. The story takes place in Torquay, Christie's place of birth, where we're meeting virtually for the festival. In 1895, Madge Miller was 16 years old and Agatha was 5. The older sister specifically made the younger sister believe that she wasn't the oldest one, but they had another elder sister who lived alone in a cave close to the Corbin's Head cliffs. Unfortunately, this elder sister was mad, which is why their parents never talked about her. When Agatha asked if she could see her and what she looked like, Madge revealed that the elder sister happened to be going to Ashfield, their beloved property. But she always went without warning. You had to be careful. As for meeting her, that posed a real problem. Physically, the elder sister was the exact double of Madge, only their voices were different. That being said, Agatha Miller, of course, looked out for the arrival of this mysterious yet terrifying sister. At first, nothing happened. Then Madge looked strangely at her little sister one day and asked her with a frightening voice, a soft, oily voice, "You know who I am, don't you, dear? I'm your sister Madge. You don't think I'm anyone else, do you? You wouldn't think that." Another time, Agatha heard someone knock at the door of the nursery, and a voice with a smooth undertone said, "Can I come in, dear? It's your elder sister." This game of cat and mouse lasted for days, stopped for a few weeks, and then would start up again. "I'm Madge, you can say that. Would you wish I was?" A strange, prime dialogue by one real sister, Madge, with a schizoid personality. Agatha's imagination and terror were ignited. The author admitted that all Madge had to do years later was imitate the elder sister's voice to send shivers down Agatha's spine. For me, this anecdote, which makes up about 20 lines of the autobiography and which I've romanticized in the preamble of my essay, is the primary scene for the whole of Agatha Christie's work. From this strange game, the writer harnessed three truths at length in her work. Firstly, with a few adjustments, it is possible to display a double identity. In Elephants Can Remember, we can read, "Same man, different hat. Same wig, different woman." Secondly, we don't know our loved ones as well as we think. That's literally written in sparkling cyanide. Frightening are really how little you might know of a person after living in the same house with them. Thirdly, those we love and who we assume love us too don't always mean us well. That's suggested in their law. You don't know, you see, what's behind them. It's like a mask. So, aren't our loved ones always those who we believe? Of course, I was interested in family, and I discovered that out of the 66 whodunits written by Christie, More than 50 of them depict familial crimes or are set within a family. So I reread these 50 odd novels through a particular lens. I glossed over the murders, but I tracked the ill will, the humiliations, the slander, the manipulations, the abuses, and the denials, as well as the objectification. In short, the hidden power struggles. Everything was there, absolutely everything. What's interesting is that from her mystery novel, Christie depicts a family. It turns out that it was Madge Miller again who introduced her little sister to the detective novel and challenged her to write a whodunit. Likewise, Madge drew young Agatha's attention to the difficulties in forming a good plot. Yet, from the mysterious affair at Styles, Christie's genius was not to treat the mystery novel as just a narrative puzzle. She is infinitely more interested in the human factor of crime. Also, in the most extraordinarily powerful and intuitive way, in my opinion, the young novelist integrated all the necessary constraints of forming a good mystery, but in a context where they are legitimate for the substance in the context of a family. Let's look at the constraint imposed by Madge. An unclosed space, Christie responded with the family home. Only a few suspects, but all are potentially guilty. Loved ones, a kinship, as Christie wrote about the protagonists of The Mysterious Affair at Styles. A reader put on the same footing as the detective. In other words, the truth is scattered throughout the text. Let's exploit family secrets, suggested Christie. Ideally, finally, the motive behind the murder has to be kept secret. It's the best protection for the killer and the best intrigue for the writer. In what real-life context do we find both the intensity of human passions and the possibility to conceal them within the family? From her first whodunit, the future Queen of Crimes set out to explore not the form, the narrative technique of the mystery novel, but the substance, the nature of family evil. The first point of my theory is that the murder conceals the true theme of the work. What Christie talks about throughout her novels is family, how most of them operate, and more specifically, how ill will is understood in them. Let's take the houses. Agatha Christie loved houses. Before World War II, she owned 8. In her books, she treats them like characters. In Hercule Poirot's Christmas, for example, she writes, "So many windows, a house, mademoiselle, has its eyes and its ears." Cottages and dwellings can be as duplicitous as human in Christie's works. The houses reveal and hide, they protect and imprison, they structure and destroy. 8 of them are reflected in the title of a novel. The Pale Horse, Crooked House, at Bertram's Hotel, etc. Their inhabitants say "my house" in the same way they would say "my mother." For instance, in Sad Cypress, they had always loved Unterbury, both of them, dear Unterbury. The French philosopher Gaston Bachelard wrote that the home is a big nursery. For another philosopher, the German Otto Friedrich Bourdieu, the wall that protects and the roof that shelters delineates the interior, the space of security, and the exterior, the space of threat. Intuitively, Bourdieu wrote, the evil is exogenous. It's just the opposite in Christie's works. The evil is endogenous. In The Guilty Vicarage, Winston Youth Oden said, "It should be the great good place, for the more Eden-like it is, the greater the contradiction of murder." Horror and disillusionment are as destructive as the place is wonderful. The duplicity of the house appears in broad daylight. The most insidious of all is the house that Tuppence Beresford once spotted from a train window in by the pricking of my thumbs. Visible from the railway line, it offers bright and serene inhabited facade, while its opposite face reveals it to be empty, disturbingly banal and then terrifying. The houses that punctuate Agatha's works don't need dark cellars and attics with spiders to shelter evil. Cellars and attics are everywhere in Christie's work. All the rooms in the house are likely to harbor memories of violence. That's the case in Sleeping Murder. Evil doesn't need to be obscured to be accomplished, like in Crooked House. Christie exploits the Freudian concept of uncanny as few writers have done. No wonder, therefore, that nurseries are horrifying to her. The question of children in danger in their own homes underlines Christie's work. And what about the nursery rhymes used to name 8 of her most well-known titles? 5 Little Pigs, Hickory Dickory Dock, One Buckle My Shoe, A Pocketful of Rye, etc. Christie forewarns that violence committed in family is the worst, precisely because the family, that is a family home, should be a safe place. Madge clearly framed one of the greatest difficulties of the mystery novel, which is that the reader must have access to the same clues as the detective. So the clues have to be scattered throughout the whole text without the reader working out their clues. French literary professor Pierre Bayard describes the process of double entente. Double entente is a statement that offers the possibility of 2 opposing or at least different readings. For example, at the beginning of Sleeping Murder, we can read, "Immediately, Gwenda felt a throb of appreciation, almost of recognition. This was her house. Already she was sure of it." Of course, it is quite possible to express yourself in this way when you fall in love with a house at first sight. But when the reader learns several chapters later that Gwenda in fact lived in this house, the passage takes on a different literal meaning. Yet, in which context can we use double entente, ellipsis, double meaning, which is sometimes perfidious? Where does speech must need to be decoded? In the family. I would like to highlight what Angela Warren said in 5 Little Pigs. I'd suddenly began to discover the intoxication of words to affirm that within the family, language is necessarily intoxicated, manipulated. Not necessarily in a bad way, though. Firstly, language inserts itself between the lineage and the world to protect its member in an healthy way. Certain pain is avoided or ignored so as not to rub salt into the wound. Certain idiosyncrasies are transformed within the context of the speech or even justified to avoid harm. In After the Funeral, for example, Rosamund Shane says that when she saw her aunt, Cora, she thought, "What a frump she was, and that really one might as well be dead if one looked like that." But she didn't say it outside of the family until she had to, in the context of the inquiry. So, firstly, language is intoxicated, biased, you might also say, for a good cause. However, secondly, language is poisoned as well, in an unhealthy way, when it serves to settle scores, wound, or insinuate ill will with the family. In Dumb Witness, where Teresa Arundel never misses an opportunity to tackle her cousin Belatanios, Little Diggs used to point out that she copied a piece of jewelry, an outfit, in fact, to humiliate Bella, who is so awkward and envious. Worse, in Crooked House, Magda Leonides, a flamboyant actress, doesn't stop calling her daughter changeling. Behind this terrible word, this insult, in fact, Magda's deception and narcissistic wound are revealed. How can this beautiful woman have brought Josephine into the world, such an ugly little girl? Needless to say, It doesn't help Josephine to blossom. No one says anything. This is a constant that Agatha Christie highlights. Within the family, the evil is concealed. It's explicitly written several times in After the Funeral, or They Do It With Mirror, for example. And right from the beginning of Styles, one character declares, "Real crime, you'd know at once the murderer's identity. Don't mean the police, but the people that are right in it, the family. You couldn't hoodwink them. They'd know." From page 19 of Agatha Christie's first novel, which is Hercule Poirot's first inquiry, it's clear that the loved ones know, and they're silent. About 15 novels depict a family member who is covering up a murder. For Christie, things are clear. Omerta is a family sport, and silence is the soundtrack to the patriarchy. Not just for covering up murders, it also smothers above all frightful little matters, interminable distress or ordinary villainy. The victims can't complain. They agreed that they would never be heard. Agatha Christie's business, and in this respect she is radical and subversive, illustrate that the evil is tripartite within the family. There is the aggressor, the aggrieved, and the entourage. From simple disrespect to murder, passing through incest, it is impossible to understand how families work without taking this equation into account. The writer never gets tired. She has been repeating the experience for 100 years. She describes it in more than 50 out of 66 novels. Loved ones don't see, and they don't react. Christie describes in a way that few novelists have this process of getting used to insecurity, to passivity, versus the omnipotence of a loved one who at home makes it rain, shine, and makes disasters occur. Agatha Christie has spent her work illustrating how the omnipotence of a family member is destructive. Of course, this makes us think about Me Too and Me Too incest. That's my theory. This is how I explain that Agatha Christie's plots continue more than ever to meet an ever-growing audience. She's a great writer, very important. Against all expectations, Christie is incredibly modern. Despite her conservatism from her Victorian upbringing, even she was trapped in her area and made some of her characters make some scandalous remarks. Despite everything, by denouncing the omnipotence within the family, the novelist was almost a century ahead of this extraordinary liberation movement that is Me Too. That's the second point of my theory. What happens in Agatha Christie's novels? We discover a body. Corpus Christi, the murder reveals something that the family doesn't want to see. To continue, at the level of the work, the murder hides the principal theme, which is the family. Within the narration, the murder reveals that evil is in the family. There is a murderer among us. The body forces the family to call the police, formalize that there really is a problem, an enormous problem. There is, for example, a grandfather poisoned in his bed, or a maid murdered in the cupboard under the stairs, or a body in the library. Because of the murder, the family is rarely forced to look at what they didn't want to see. Even worse, they have to talk about it. They have to acknowledge the evil. Interestingly, the body speaks in Agatha Christie because there again, despite appearances, she reveals herself to be very modern. The Queen of Crime has been heavily criticized for her relationship with the body. Raymond Chandler, Robin Cook, and other writers have claimed that it shows that she has never seen her body shit or blood. On his case, on the contrary, they were completely wrong. Just before, and especially during the First World War, The young married Mrs. Christie did her part. She was an apprentice first aid worker, a ward assistant in the Red Cross hospital in Turkey, then a nurse, notably in the operating room assisting surgeons. The passages described in her autobiography are eloquent. She cleaned urinals and basins, cleaned up vomit, put up with the smell of festering wounds, and she fainted during her first operation, an intimidating intervention on the abdomen, among the most difficult to see, the matron reassured her. Several months later, in turn, Agatha supported a novice by helping her to take an amputated leg down to the incinerator. Do you know many novelists who have ever taken an amputated leg down to the incinerator? I don't in any case. However, Chandler, Cook, and others were right when they claimed that the body is unreal in Christie, rendered abstract. The murder is never bodily described, if you will pardon the expression. Whether for the victim or their entourage, the moment of confronting suffering and death is kept at a distance. Neither the loss of a loved one nor murder as a violent act seems to interest the novelist. In her texts, Christie only shares the result. There is a body somewhere in the house. Raymond Chandler got worked up, suggesting that the crime only consists of providing a body in Christie's work. He is completely right. In a way, the corpse is only seen as a sign, the proof that there really has been a crime. There is an extraordinary passage in They Do It With Mirrors, where the family, in the broad sense, hears an argument between two characters behind the closed doors of a study room. A shot is fired. Then Miss Believer's footstep rang purposefully across the hall. She came in with her lips pursed together and a flushed face. "I've telephoned the police," she said grimly. "They will be here in a few minutes." Carrie-Louise cried, "Jolie!" in tones of dismay. Edgard uttered a wail. Lewis circled frowned angrily. "I told you, Jolie, I didn't want the police summoned. This is a medical matter." "That's as may be," said Miss Believer. "I've my own opinion, but I had to call the police. Mr. Gulbranson's be shot dead." The inhabitants of Stonygates can't leave Mr. Gulbranson's body where it's lying. They can't continue life as before, tell themselves everything is fine, and pretend. The body has a symbolic function. It sheds light on a fact that had previously been left in the shadows, a hidden truth that otherwise could have never been established. Something isn't right at Stonygates. A process of destruction is in progress. In this text, like the majority of Christie's whodunits, the body disturbs the family by forcing them to see what they don't want to see, the truth. Agatha Christie's real quest is not to restore the order established by the triumph of good over evil, like in most mystery novels. Christie's true quest is the truth. To highlight this, I focused on 5 novels that deal with investigations after the fact. Not cold cases left unsolved, but always family cases that were already solved a long time ago. Stories in which many of the protagonists die, including the guilty. In 5 Little Pigs, An Ordeal by Innocence, the murderers died in prison. In Nemesis, the killer has languished there for 10 years. In Sleeping Murder, he ended his day in a psychiatric hospital. As for Ravencroft, they rest if possible in peace. Cases closed. It's all over, done, finished with, as the protagonist says. Except for one person, close to the family but generally not very close, who thinks something is wrong and asks Jane Marple or Hercule Poirot for the help. The reopening of the investigation generally leads to another murder, proving that the case merits being re-examined and the family will explode. Like in Ordeal by Innocence, Kirsten Lindstrom warns ex-pilot Philip Duran. You have been a pilot. You have faced death up there in the sky. Can you not see that if you get anywhere near the truth, you are in just as great danger as you ever were in the war? In most of Agatha Christie's novels, and in those 5 in particular, the truth can no longer be concealed. Old sins have long shadows, as the saying goes, she writes twice, both in A Pocketful of Rye and in The Hollow. Evidently, the novelist exploits the family's secrets and their consequences, but she does it from a very specific angle. Agatha's heroes deny that within families, some are allowed to forget the evil which they have done, while others aren't allowed to forget what they have suffered. The liberated speech that Agatha Christie uses in her plots is not at all political. Nevertheless, by denying oblivion and the law of silence, her apparently resentful characters help to deliver the final blow to the patriarchy. They assume that they cannot put a lid on it. They firmly assert that they don't want to pretend, and that even if they want to, they couldn't. Although the issue of the patriarchy is never explicit in Christie's work, of course, she is never conceptual, much less political. It's in those moments there that the writer most firmly opposes the traditional family system. Throughout her entire work, Agatha Christie interrogates the family's relationship with the truth. By describing domestic crimes, the novelist shows that truth and family are not a good combination, and through her detectives, she intends to put the truth back at the heart of relationship between loved ones. You always need to be able to say what's happened. My essay can be read as a rereading of Christie's work. It can also be understood as an analysis of the functioning of families and their relationship to evil. Up to the reader to decide.